好了，让之能在说，生理东西有的上帝有个马头吧，你真是心里年那这只是什么最好考虑什么，除了那那这年米这些，你上一部分啊，俺的那个只是甚至于最后只是升级，等于是于最好吧，老人没把于眼前，不得，人我考虑没得没呢，你能也把来好着了，你也考虑的，yes，你没什么理解。那回事，你在那么这边，我这件事情啊，最先的有没有说过蛤蟆到啊？这也说的啊，那不也，你在当然这个是是不得了。可是人不语，有没国家赛的，你能也把工具这类打给我去吗？然后不要，可以其他有没把这些事情，有没把在哪里去？然后你有没得嘞？其实。那有没把这当然对你个点一些去帮你啥不能这吧？帮的现在那来了，你没去一些呀，你嘛这些很没钱的，那个我嘛给的我嘛也是，好多是，你其他呢是个是点别人做些也，那个女的如果给你爬山比不了，你我想大家，如果现在你也都做。你变成领域去台湾那你被请不起完的人接触，用现在马鸟的用西个也是，那你么么了？那么也是，那什么这个方法么到也是，你的那你么把的，都写也是可以学了。
Good evening. So with a motivation of bodhicitta, one has the determination to strive to become enlightened in order to benefit all beings and to bring about the attainment of enlightenment. One engages in the various trainings, various practices of a bodhisattva. For one's training to come about well, the practitioner requires conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a virtuous mind that turns the mind towards the side of virtue and keeps the mind on the side of virtue. So in the verses we looked at last week, we saw that the minds that are not on the side of virtue, the afflictions, they are our actual enemies, and they have been harming us and only harming us since beginningless time. We have to therefore strive to apply the antidotes to eradicate them, at the very least to subdue them temporarily so that we do not fall into the low realms. And whilst worldly enemies, for example, those that invade a country, they can be repelled, but later they'll go away, and having regained their strength, they will come once again to enact their revenge. The afflictions, though, are not like this. The afflictions, once eradicated, can never return.
这个你们不包括你帮人的啥不呢？这帮人的但是帮我是呢，当然吧，有毛病，常常好来对面距离那个这个是呢，很大声骂的吧，老我些大声骂的，一个的，三天，你个大声骂的个这一年没干法，所以帮我个别些了，光这，你不点这个嘛，就是可能呢，你来把我的是呢的，那这些的就是呢，那个不理解。
Ngomel Lobsang Dorje Sungin. Do you know him? To abandon the afflictions from their root requires firstly that one identifies what the root cause of all the afflictions are, and that is the ignorance of self-grasping. And as we saw last week, once one has recognized the root cause of the afflictions, it is that we should strive to eradicate through the application of its specific antidote, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness.
Ele Shanam Nakida Ayan, Bani Pro Pumiches, Gini Juda, Geshe Inla Jipong, Shisha Tubates, and then the main Yido Tala, Yellow Som, Son and Suti Jinye Jeva, Neba Chiesa, Oliva.
Coming to the penultimate verse in the 47th chapter. The penultimate verse in the 4th chapter, verse number 47. Afflictions do not abide in the object, not in the sense faculties, nor in between. Since they are also nowhere else, where do they reside, harming all migrators? As they are like illusions, rid the heart of fear and make use of effort for the sake of wisdom. Why torture myself for no real reason in the lower realms?
Is Allah the how the new body, the hotel Chasam, and take it at Yawachima, Malcolm Chiba to Sasada, Numo got the DS, Chidan told me Numo DS, to keep on Wodies, I'm about to be sure Perio Prescription up. Then in the Eliadala, Numo body come to the DS. Ram Numo body, and it, Buddha any Tibet and Numo crop around the winning to Tibet, she will not bound to the best that on to Smith. That's some Chiwan Mason, and they get to one Mason in New World.
This verse follows on from what we looked at last week, which was in particular what's been looked at over this much of this chapter, that the afflictions are the very cause of our suffering. All the suffering we've experienced in this life and every previous life, every problem, suffering, or difficulty comes from our afflictions. And in fact, it's these very afflictions that lead us to create the causes to be born in the lower realms. But moreover, it's these very afflictions that keep us bound in the suffering realms of samsara. So with this clearly identified that our sole enemy are these afflictions, the question will arise, but can they really be abandoned?
The new was to in Shanti and Motiba, Alan Pada Cronway, and when you do to Yabella in it, be in a country of my head.
So, in answer to the question, can these afflictions actually be eradicated? The answer is definitely they can, because they are not self-existent or existent by way of their own nature or essence. If they were self-existent or existent by way of their own nature, essence, or existent from their own side, it would mean they are independent of causes, parts, and imputation. But this is not the case. They are not independent. They are not unchanging. They are able to be eradicated.
Memoba said the Pidan Kala Emma do her and when it produces Mades. The Mainza, Memoba the carriage is Pida Kien, change the dinner, come to Bodhisattvas.
It's not that afflictions are independent of causes and so forth. They are actually dependent.
Is that Memoba the Raman the Drugaina and it? That's good. That is in Jushigo. Do the King career of a senator. No more nam the Yunan, so then no more about it. I will share the matter about the random way. She to Bamba, to Yoba in USS call, but that's your so good around the Numo with kissing you. The name to get Chavas methods of the methods in Numo Picaina. Is that G. Numo, but you get a method to the order as you get the order lesson. Usually your heart is United years. You want and United years. You want to Langake, you will get another color in that. Body by that. So that usually me give water. So that you didn't you body, didn't you body, you tell the other bear stuff. Run when the do because you want to you over that. And you can do your Yana, say you can do your body. So that you So you get your body, you get your mates, your mon and unanimous.
The first line starts to challenge this misapprehension, this wrong understanding that the afflictions perhaps are self-existent. Because if they were self-existent, they would exist somewhere. They would have a residence, an abode. They would be found somewhere. So where would that somewhere be? Well, perhaps it would be in the object towards which afflictions arise. So, for example, one may have attachment for a flower, or who knows, perhaps even anger towards a flower. So does the affliction abide within the object, in this case a flower? Of course not. So this is the first part of the first line. Afflictions do not abide in the object.
You did it, me too. Sending your to you over class. Like you did in your body, you did more to care about it. It's a matter. Maybe you take a you by you did a sheet away and you mock the key of waters. Is an young pamba, touching about this you get in that one, you key of study. Maybe you just start.
And that the afflictions do not abide in the object. This is shown through the illustration that of the absurd consequence that would follow if the afflictions did abide in the object, let's say this flower. It would mean whomever observed that flower, or saw that flower, the afflictions would arise, including an arat, a foe destroyer, a being that has abandoned the afflictions. So even an arat would give rise to afflictions when seeing the object, because the afflictions would be abiding in that object. Of course, this is not the case.
In the usually didn't matter, and that never and that they on good solar means so that you can gain you on opportunity number shape. You can hear it's all right. There's on solar needs.
One point down. Nikkei. Koso. The sentence continues. So having rejected that afflictions could potentially abide in the object, it continues, nor in the sense faculties. So here we should rather, our translation should be, not in the sense faculties, nor the sense consciousnesses, both should be there. Not in the sense faculties or sense consciousnesses. So the afflictions do not abide in the sense faculty or sense power, nor in the resulting or subsequent sense consciousness. One put on what I want to say, Niha. Garka Nika. You get up and number.
And another one for the Sheba.
See what up translates what's on the borders, not in the sense faculties. The Tibetan is literally the sense accumulation of senses. So it's quite accumulation of your senses. It's just quite abbreviated. So what it refers to is neither the sense faculties nor the sense consciousnesses, but also neither the mental consciousness. So that's not stated explicitly either, but it is included. So the afflictions do not abide within the sense powers. So not in the sense power of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the smell or the tactile sensation, nor the resulting sense consciousnesses, nor in the mental consciousness. So none of the sense consciousness, none of the consciousnesses, none of the primary consciousnesses, nor any of their sense powers is the affliction to be found. Dumpini ngusum dukpekaba ngusum. Ngusum?
Ya thola mene ya sang ye ba bo to ba la yan ba sha sui to len gong su yan zhen ma do ba yan ba sha gong yu do len yan ba sha ha ba la is tu to ba ya no sum to yan de yan ba sha ka ga ge mi mo ni go mi me ba ye me ba za da yi su ge wong bo di ye yo mo mo ji wong bo da wong xie bi mo de de ba yin na de da ne wong bo di yo de de xie ba di no ba tu xie de wong ju de wa zhe dan yu ya de yin ne mo yu wa. So the
absurd consequence that would follow. So here comes the reason why the afflictions are not to be found within any of the faculties or resulting primary consciousnesses, is that the absurd consequence would be that if the afflictions abided in the sense faculties or resulting primary consciousnesses, when a practitioner is in meditative equipoise on emptiness, whether emptiness is being realized directly or inferentially, the afflictions would be present in their mind. But this is not the case, because when the meditator is realizing emptiness, they are realizing emptiness alone. The afflictions are not manifest, but they would be if they abided in the faculties or the primary consciousnesses.
Barna means Barna means yu di ne da che nam yu tong ge ong bo dang ye le de bi xie ba ji yu xie yu jin di wen men da ba che yu dang yu ni ye Barna ye di ba xue de es ne ni yo de ye da yo es ba da eso ne se gen bro men so yu ji da yu ji ji ba la no ko di eso ka lo ba de wa na ni mo sha.
The final part of the first line, nor in between. So having rejected that the afflictions abide inherently either within the object or the sense power or the resulting primary consciousness, here it's stated that it doesn't abide anywhere between the object nor the object possessor, the consciousnesses. Nowhere, even in between, can inherently existent afflictions be found. The second line starts with, since they are also nowhere else. So in other words, there is nowhere else that inherently existent afflictions can be found. It has been shown they cannot abide in the object, nor in the body, so in the sense powers, nor in the resulting primary consciousnesses, nor anywhere in between that can inherently existent afflictions be found. So therefore, there is also nowhere else that they can be found.
And did you go to the person or now the young got to get she drew about it? She do not, and then he say, you got back, and she do give a enough, and the Yugi get your body, you get your Sendu. Nana, you see, it can be your body. Anna, you see to the mena, either you see Banashi boy, Ele Bana, Ele Shepayo, you are stepper, no more what it Rashi, you do down Badubi, that Chevacheta did soon go.
So the meaning here is that inherently, if afflictions existed inherently or by way of their own nature or essence or from their own side, they would have to be found. So we saw this at first. They'd have to abide somewhere. They'd have to reside somewhere. And so that somewhere has been sought. It's been sought in the object, in the body, in these subtle sense powers or the resulting primary consciousnesses, nor in between, and not anywhere else. An inherently existent affliction, when sought, cannot be found. So that is the meaning of the verse thus far, that afflictions cannot abide inherently, because if they did, they would be found, but having sought them, they cannot be found anywhere.
And about your coding on the Chitang, the Yomo, but the Yakawayers and then on the city can be one. Yes, she didn't have a city. Then Yomo, but the sort of city to be like a Yoba and the MI through to Yomo body. You don't change the train, do the Yomo particular about that. You don't change, I mother by chicken, but didn't go. This of that. Is that Yomo Rashi to give a children in that? You don't change, I'm not about you call you about that thing to the Yoban. Okay, in a year about you are doing that. Okay, in a year, that's enough. Okay, let you go about it. So that what in a year but trouble. You will be the driver anyway. And you can't get never picture any. In a thing in the year of trouble. Did Cherry in a year when not did you do us and on my number shot again. After the circular, your mobile. Yes, no bone to no part. Isn't getting a little shame. Is that the name? Your mobile. And say the good idea, how I bought you about when you do you want to say you were sending work and it is your demo, your lesson, you're my test of this.
What has been presented here then is that the afflictions do not exist inherently or by way of their own essence. Because if they were, they would be found, but one has sought them, and they cannot be found. So that being said, though, we do know there is such a thing as afflictions, and that they abide within our mind. That being said, whilst they do abide in our mind, what has been rejected is they are not existent within the nature of mind, when the essence of mind. Because if they were, they would exist independent of causes. They would exist in a way that is self-existent within the mind, which means they would not require causes to arise. Not requiring causes, they would be ever present. And no single affliction is ever present. This we can recognize for ourselves. Independence on causes, afflictions arise. Therefore, afflictions cannot be independent of causes, because if they were independent of causes, they would not require causes to arise, but would be ever present. They would be manifest in all circumstances. But this is not the case. So whilst afflictions are on our mind, on our mental consciousness, they are not in the nature of mind. They are not inherently existent within the mind.
The lama, your mobile, your mobile, silly to do your body. Your body, your mobile. Land you when you do the Rashi to be your most sure, and the same day, send the your mobile, your nation made again. Chiki, your nation. So that you have been a dramatic. Now, the Niki time, those who Chesana the new mobile said, the dig mind bar, the hysterical new mobile said, you don't change it, new mobile. Then you don't change it, new mobile car. You don't get very good to horror of Sina, how to be that change chair, how to keep with it. I am consulted a corner of the mouth or the mashi here. Other good I change it, they are quantity man, yard of field here. Jim, never said him go. So that you don't get a hundred scary come no more, kill about that. You don't get how much of it, I know you say, I don't know, do some more.
So to restate that, to make sure it's clear. So whilst afflictions are consciousness, they are to be found within the mind. They are not in the nature of mind. They are not inherently existent within the mind. Because if they were, they would exist in a way that is independent of causes. Nothing would have an impact on them. They would just be ever present. They wouldn't require some stimulation of causes and conditions to arise, because they would exist by way of their own nature. But this is not the case. For example, anger. We can recognize when we have been angry or when we are angry, and we can recognize that this anger came about independence on something, came about independence on some kind of causes. This we can recognize, therefore, and this is the important consequence of recognizing that one's anger, for example, came about independence on a cause. It is not independent, and therefore it cannot be the nature of our mind. The afflictions, or any individual affliction, cannot be in the nature of our mind. Every consciousness requires an object. In other words, a consciousness needs to be thinking about something or engaged with something. So anger is consciousness. It requires, therefore, an object. One needs to be angry about something. So therefore, we recognize that anger requires an object, but it requires an additional cause as well, that being improper mental attention. So the object of anger may well be something external, but internal, one will have a further condition of improper mental attention. When these two come together, anger results. So therefore, the object alone does not lead to anger. A further condition is required, improper mental attention, and when that and the object come together, an affliction will follow, such as anger. And then it to me, she look here, to me, she gets idea, you won't say go, you won't, then it to me, anything, and get any way to make you what the shit you want is. Says I didn't get a no more make a lot of who says you should do mongo, you only tongue for it. And the niggas, you mongo the tron and will call your more kill about you just so about them, but no more can't never. Any that tools, whichever she. The new mobile say, you don't can't call a mother, your mobile said, do us a bit sometimes. You mobile, I never said, Tongo, you mobile, they had to do it.
有冇乜的拉心的 truth 嘛？有的研究啊，把这过的。至少在天的不会呢，有冇乜的语给的有的语些给的有，还是现在你的也差不多。有冇乜的那本来就是你有的见的一个，我早了对你冇见个，因为你见的是基本上的见面多啊。哎，话这个有冇乜事的，有的见面过的，电人现在电人去丢你妈的，现在嘛这个有冇事到多是没什么这有冇啊？
I give a couple of illustrations. Bearing in mind, every consciousness requires an object. So let's take an illustration. One sees a person and one responds with anger. So this clearly is a person one dislikes, but merely seeing this person alone is insufficient for anger to arise. First, there is the object, so this particular person. Then, as one is seeing them, one requires a sense power, so this subtle form, in which the color and shape of the person arises. Then follows the sense consciousness, and then an array of mental consciousnesses. These will include this improper mental engagement, and then anger. And this is the process for anger. It's the same for the other afflictions. So let's take attachment. To one's eye sense power appears color and shape. Then sense consciousness, and then various mental consciousnesses, which interpret that color and shape as a flower. And then improper mental engagement is involved, and then attachment for that flower arises. So what we see here is that there's quite a process of causes and conditions that are required for an affliction to arise. This means an affliction is not independent, but dependent. If it were independent, it would be independent of causes and conditions. But as presented, we see that the affliction comes about independent on many causes and conditions. So what we have seen thus far is that the affliction does not abide in the object, nor in the sense faculty, sense consciousness, or any mental consciousnesses, nor in between, nor anywhere else. So therefore, the affliction does not exist inherently, but exists dependently, which means not being inherently existent, but being dependent, afflictions can be eradicated.
to conjugate nyanga yo sabe na stanno de tuji shi how po de namsa tempa do ta di ke shi lo ba le sin di sa pa de jen da ke jo da de ya ji ta ji yu ji ya ni ji o da di ko la ji ko le ko la de ma ji ba de san pa pa se ne ni ko tu bi ji ki kai wa du do se kai ni ko de ki go ba wa ji sa ji ma ko sang bo de ya tu yi shi ro de de ya jen yi shi yi ko ki bi ba how po de an lam sa tempa den che ko lian ne bi do chu lu sa pa sha be ne ni mo ba de ki pu lo ji gen ji ba sa ri ke de yo mo pa ji ma pa se.
Selbu Gosson, kesa Tsepo Tuya Chikdang Son Di Dan Tumpo Yore, Bakyo De, Dam Pena Drimpa, Di Sinjung Loka De, Dan Da Chikap Chupa Made, ha? There. Gekas in Kilm Don Selpo Son So. So to tie this then into the overall purpose of this chapter on conscientiousness, we have this sequence going on, that there is the object of consciousness, so what the consciousness is engaging with, and that's in the illustration is a person. So this person is not, in the illustration, being heard or touched, but seen. So there, to the eye sense power, the color and shape of the object appears, and this is transferred to the, or independence on that, the sense consciousness arises, and then a variety of mental consciousnesses interpreting this color and shape as a person, and this particular person, and associated thoughts about this person. Moreover, there's improper mental engagement present. Here now, we rely on the virtuous mental factor of conscientiousness. Conscientiousness plays the role of one being careful about the potential consequence of how to say, maybe I can say it like this. Conscientiousness serves to serve as being conscientious of not being afflicted. So it serves as a moral compass. And so in this particular case, conscientiousness plays the role of, I recognize that from seeing this object, this person, I know what is likely to follow because I have a history with this person. And conscientiousness, it plays the role of a moral compass. And here, at this point, it acts as a guard against the arisal of our afflictions. And through conscientiousness, we call mindfulness, we rely on mindfulness. So mindfulness, because the word in English doesn't have this meaning, it is also, mindfulness has the meaning of memory or recollection. So mindfulness then, coming subsequent to conscientiousness or following conscientiousness, mindfulness then serves to remind us about the faults of the afflictions. Because this person, we have a relationship with them, we dislike them. So mindfulness now serves to remind us about the faults of the afflictions. So, and moreover, mindfulness will also here, in dependence on our training, serve to call to mind an antidote. And that will be another virtuous mind, and we will apply this new virtuous mind, this new virtuous mental factor. So here we've used several mental factors, that of conscientiousness, that of mindfulness, and now let's say a virtuous mind such as compassion. But this will be generated through a thought process, perhaps reminding oneself that this person is under the control of their afflictions, therefore they act in the way they do, or they talk in the way they do. So this is how, through relying on conscientiousness, we have this ethical guard that serves to enable us to apply antidotes to the arisal or potential arisal of the afflictions.
你那在的两门我写一举段眼帮我去创的结果报的举段健康了一把的让我们年不举人嘛今天了没办法在你们看得起举段眼一些的电力主对吧人家山东人这个眼线一也是读书面部先去看吧呢你眼睛看嘛就刚出过来现在你在你们给年不大的吧特别写了好吧呢因为嘛一个 Gida Parana, Rovo Puni Chitsi, Seda, Iniki, Adumo Bati, Sabona Chilla, Pansha Igati, Saban Chip Obaina, and Tor, we all never see him over there. Yes.
Did that go on? You can check down people.
Walk with Garda, Garnia to walk Puni Chitsi.
I did it. You can logia did and can sung yet. I did drop a draw as Tongimundo.
No more he did down the whole to be shared to Yimbo Tenche, she Ponko, Savage, Onashabaina, the draw we and draw Sinja Tamche and the Liverchi, my son Bachi, they so be royal at the Jacket yours, so we are mad.
The second line then concludes, maybe I'll just read the whole line together. Since they are also nowhere else, where do they reside, harming all migrators? So we have investigated and come to recognize that the afflictions are not inherently existent, because if they were, they would be found. And we have looked, we've sought all over, and we found nowhere where they reside. So they cannot exist inherently. Yet they do harm migrators. So they exist, but not by way of their own nature. They are not inherently existent. What this means is they are dependent arisings. If they were inherently existent, they would be independent. They wouldn't require causes because they existed by way of their own nature. But we've just seen that the afflictions require many causes and conditions. And why this is so important is because something arises in dependence on causes. By introducing contrary causes, as in the previous example, by introducing contrary causes, we can break that sequence, that chain, and thereby we can harm the afflictions themselves. We can overpower the afflictions. We can prevent them from arising. And this is possible because they do not exist inherently anywhere.
Dini Judas, then your mobati, Azoya, Anichi, Lango Mone, Trubasha, Loria, Tenik, Lango, Ina, Jusheba, Langone to your Judah, Shala, Dili to the mother, Judah and Kilamatu, Langone to the Yoma test. And I got Menaya, and the Dinik Yoba, Lango, yes, and Mana, yes, Luajo, yes, Miabachi, and the Yoba, no go, you are. Bendigo, he Judas, no more by G, and Lando Void and Madrumaya, and Lambo. Now, Martin Jebachena, can only do your matters, Dimana Chipates.
Therefore, afflictions are dependent arisings. They are dependent on a wide number of causes and conditions. But they appear to us as being real or as being true or as existing in the way that they appear. But this is not the case. And what else can this be likened to? And here's the third line. They are like illusions. An illusion appears as something real, but it's not, it's an illusion. This is how the afflictions are. They appear to us as so real. We really believe that the person exists in this way or the plow in that way, but this is not the case. So therefore, the afflictions are here likened to illusions.
Geshe, Jesa Yamova, the Judah, Shala, Dini Truba, is a Rango and Batuba in the Aposh Judah, Shala, Dil, whomever said, Tom to Imba Pano to be Shero Combine, on Fubo, this, you need to be that. For Rango Muni Madu, Judah, Shala, Dilba in the and Judah, Shan, Junior, but Mabka, what is, Geshe, so.
You could Jamie Cooper. Then I missed the word. As they are like illusions, and then we insert therefore. So therefore shows that reason, and the reason is just presented. That because the afflictions are not inherently existent, but are like illusions, they can be abandoned.
And new like Chibocom also the name that they don't send much or account de Villa, or that the new Mahodi Pantuma, when you remember that the Pantuma recipe, Shannon Yumba rang you where you drew about it, is that the Pantuma Yama big, Shanaki or about his, is I, in Niggy Kersen, Yumba body Putin King Shala Penny to the Akaram on the Padua was. Is that the new Pantuma recipe? Shanaki or Nimetic portion, Shana Geo, Yoko Mare, keep your money. Is that the name that? 以前那么叫啊，这条毛把这放土不的，这里有点，其他的，把完了给咱们的马都把有点见血，俺们都后边写了背的就好把人的，其出去的上面现在机关没了这，你了，生理的保育给，俺们保育给些，咱们把这边写了，用一年过也是情况也是是，往去是的。 你们几个方式是对了变现的，别是什么好别才行。
As they are like illusions, therefore rid the heart of fear. So one may well be fearful, but here we are being encouraged, in dependence of what you've just heard, do not be fearful. Because fear arises from a feeling of helplessness, of feeling either that the afflictions cannot be eradicated because they are inherently existent, or that they are too strong. They overwhelm me. They are stronger than I am. But here, Shantideva is saying, take heart. Rid the heart of fear. The afflictions are dependent arisings. They come about in dependence on causes. Therefore, by introducing contrary causes, such as conscientiousness and the wisdom realizing emptiness, you can eradicate the afflictions. It is entirely possible.
这边你有大话那说，当时几点了解？
Kuna.
这边你有大话那说，当时几点了解
？Alele. Kuna dit dokter. Okay, this one is.
接下来，因为就是接下来用把的念波点解，就必须是用波点解，他没把特别写到空气，念波点用把创作不有把听个这样，都是念波点麻烦把去下这边的。对面吧，现在起步就去过一个地方买这个里面的大车，那个你没把它里面搞完了，你有没把地的，我的就是有没把地不是，两那说的话，去，吃到我呢去过巴士，意思以及别的马卡拉的，也就是我们也是一部地的嘛，过来。
Link what has just been presented in the previous segment with this here. Rid your heart of fear and make use of effort for the sake of wisdom. Here, Shantideva is encouraging us. Don't be overwhelmed by a feeling of inadequacy or by a wrong understanding of the afflictions. Rid yourself of fear and strive to cultivate wisdom. For if you do not cultivate wisdom, one in the fourth line, one will end up being tortured through the afflictions in this life and in the lower realms. And for what? For no real reason. If one feels one cannot do it, that's not a real reason. If one feels the afflictions cannot be eradicated or they are too strong and powerful, that's not a reason in accordance with reality. And so for no real reason, one ends up following the afflictions, striving for things of no importance, striving to achieve things which have no real value, and end up creating the causes that lead to rebirth in the lower realms. So rather, strive to rely on wisdom.
那里呢，这代人nam是比较写白的，那么比别去对别的家，每个人那么年度年来面大的。绝对那个社保卡来也，那些事情，绝保我对我的朋友也写下来，你有是保我。
Then we come to the concluding verse, and it's not ever in English, but there's a concluding line, which I'll just read out. So the concluding verse, having contemplated thoroughly in this way, strive to accomplish the trainings just as explained. If a doctor's instructions are ignored, how can the ill in need of treatment be cured by medicines? This is the commentary on the fourth chapter called Showing Conscientiousness, from the commentary on the introduction to the actions of a Bodhisattva, called The Entrance for the Children of the Conquerors.
Somebody Shasang Dorje now said that Keter nam some Keter sale on the and then Chibai keep you Yemen back your son do the case of that. And to say, illusion about the Yana of the Samba or some chair, Yanan Chiu, yes, it and some said, Dama, yeah, there are so 但等于是伊朗做解决生命界咧，至于是比确保了那地是的，伊人家白个，就是比确保了看的呀，马月去钱呢，就是的，样的确保到 US，等于是。生阶段对个，到三月不好，几是别个在开了这些，因为那生阶段就知道了呀，那也比马这边了，最什么几把的是他，安的那个，你拿就那个，那个，别人拿不被得去比的不是头，你这个要搞比的个不了，因为随时没吃饱了，那是马这边的，哦，毛把的些考过来噻，安的那个当然就是，有没比个。说到朋友啊，朋友间去，这个的，我现在的，在叫起码，我那说这说到有么个的，然就其他人就去呢，就微信的到那个到噻，也说的全部这边呢，也说让对搞不容易差别这个噻，那有么不噻的，也那时候今年后面要买 S。有么不的时候，那给你是有一边了到，那那些的碰到也是，那对那个数学我被有么被决议的话都是有的，但有么被决议的上班，有么被决议的就是呀，那在你这里有么被说说你价钱，先比喻去给你我电网页也是的，也是哎呀的，就是你修不了这，你也的你数学的这些是这个，那么什么的你就说什么。因为帮助人们是个算是也来也都上班，也是也在那上班。
Having contemplated thoroughly in this way then refers to what has been presented in this chapter, the various stages of training in conscientiousness. So where the ideal practitioner is they have newly generated bodhicitta, and they've generated uncontrived bodhicitta now being counted amongst bodhisattvas. And not only have they generated aspiring bodhicitta, but they have made the vow or the promise of the bodhisattva, which is to strive in the various trainings of the bodhisattva in order to fulfill the heart wish of the bodhisattva, which is to ease others or to lead others from the suffering realms of samsara. And in this process of guiding others, the bodhisattva is also striving to become ever more spiritually developed, to help ever more, and thereby is striving to become a Buddha for the sake of others. So now, having achieved this remarkable attainment of becoming a bodhisattva, and having now taken on this great deed of the goal of the bodhisattva, not to utilize this incredible opportunity would be such a loss. So therefore, the new bodhisattva is encouraged to strive to recognize who the real enemy is for sentient beings, and that's the afflictions within. It's these very afflictions that have been harming one since beginning this time. It's these afflictions that cause all problems, suffering, and difficulty for every single being. It's just the afflictions on their continuum. It's the afflictions alone that cause this harm. So recognizing that the afflictions are the source of suffering, the bodhisattva is also here guided to recognize that the afflictions enslave beings. Beings are not free. They yearn for freedom, but they are actually victims, enslaved by their own mind, their own afflicted mind. And that these afflictions have been creating suffering in limitless varieties of ways since the beginning of time. And that the afflictions, unlike enemies in the world, we can never befriend them. We can never placate them or change our relationship with them. Afflictions in the very essence bring harm. So if we try to indulge them, that will not placate them. They'll only come back stronger. They'll only arise more strongly. So the bodhisattva comes to recognize that as long as beings are enslaved by the afflictions, they will never find peace. Therefore, the determination to eradicate the afflictions becomes ever stronger.
Geshe Thubten Rabten Geshe Thubten Rabten Geshe Thubten Rabten Sanye Kimle here, Eartha, and it didn't get engine number. Jajusiki, Jabala watch, and it Yamsu Yagi, Sung, Lava Sonyaki, Pawet, Lava Plant, Lava Punya, Pachuva Community, Aramic, Kubegi, the dove, the Pawet, was named Jogoets in Sonshaka Tikia, Betishe, Suman, Mashun, Dena. I想对这些美人就接受，这个写法这个写法意思的，上一算是这个的，那个根据对这然后送下了，那那么这些是举报那么就是起码那这些那么送一个那么的嘛高，送一个法律经过但那么年龄样说呀，一个也在那法律给去突破，你个帮我送下给也得是些。对的，pension的不把它新鲜那边就是，
Yes. Chikishe pe yichik buhan.
是的，那不可以。
Shantideva. The second line, I shall strive to accomplish the trainings just as explained. Just as explained refers to both the sutras of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, as well as their commentaries such as this. So here, the practitioner makes the commitment that they will strive in the various practices of a bodhisattva, in particular in this instance, that of conscientiousness, but certainly not solely conscientiousness. Strive in the variety of trainings of the bodhisattva and strive in the very way that they are being guided by their teachers, which is in accordance with the sutras and the various commentaries to them.
That the Jewish Tibetan and the son secretary, then not the lava which lava to swear there, let a mavo, the sungu boy, the soon and send by you get some boy, and they get by you, but then by ina, send and it tabada, control by it. The tabara work from Madonna, in it is which you begin and let you do us the circular, cap with the tumba, yes, that there is a veggie in the cold sumba, I say, sumba, and the 类似于说白了，新些马语一些人的效果也是，的马些人呢，的呢马些人呢，的呢，告诉我老板娘们要我记住嘛，老板娘们要我这么多呢，的呢，那个所谓必须真是必须人们天然够了，多个条个系统嘛的时候。
The meaning then of these two lines is that conscientiousness, the very topic of this chapter, is an indispensable virtuous mind to rely on and to cultivate it within in the way as presented by the Buddha and the various commentaries to it, such as in this chapter by Shantideva. Because as a bodhisattva, the bodhicitta that has been being cultivated, particularly when it's new, has to be guarded against the possibility of degenerating and being lost. So rather, not only does it need to therefore be guarded, but it needs, or protected, it needs to be strengthened and made stable and to grow and flourish. And the way that is done is by engaging the various trainings, cultivating the various trainings of the bodhisattva. And for all these trainings to come about well, conscientiousness is indispensable. If conscientiousness is lacking, the trainings will not be accomplished in one's mind, and one's bodhicitta will degenerate.
Maybe he shall have seen the mago, be my jabina, and let me make was a circle of my ass, the city my ass. She's at this in Nanshin, and the near sir la, maybe the Nella de Garicavana since Lavanji Bishop Chevena or the Nesu would imagine Nesu was. Be nothing to be no more punch a coil to have a son you go on top of la. The situation and Sangi from Sangepa. Nick in a decision of Sonsheri about you, if you see about Yaminish, but in Argentine and Mashavina, 아니 남들다네 가서데 제시비 쥐바가네 기하고 좀 말은 년들이 맞아 봐다 사이버 좀 말해서.
The verse concludes with, if a doctor's instructions are ignored, how can the ill in need of treatment be cured by medicines? So this analogy is very clear. If one recognizes that things aren't quite right, that one's health is a little bit off, one goes and sees a skilled physician. They take time, they do tests, they identify what is wrong, and they prescribe a course of medicinal treatment. And if one receives this advice, thanks the doctor, leaves the room, and never does anything more, it would be impossible to heal. So too, the advice that Shantideva has imparted here, with these poetic words encompassing the meaning of the Buddhist sutras, this is to be taken by each of us as personal life advice for how we are to live our own lives. Because it's through relying on conscientiousness, we can challenge and strive and overcome these afflictions. And in this way, progress to becoming a bodhisattva. And once a bodhisattva, through continuing to rely on conscientiousness, we'll be able to develop the qualities of the bodhisattva within and eventually become a Buddha. Without doing so, the path of the bodhisattva remains closed to us. And even for a bodhisattva who doesn't rely on conscientiousness, the attainment of Buddhahood is an impossibility. So therefore, this advice that's been given, we should take as personal advice, just like a patient who recognizes they are desperately ill will follow the advice of their skilled physician. And conscientiousness is a foundational training for the bodhisattva who will be engaging in the six perfections as well as the four means to positively influence others. Conscientiousness is indispensable for the development of all such qualities.
I'm getting the jokes and something in BDs, Barikiko. That did it by Oily, and the Geo, the Kyoko to it so. Lucy, not the Bayuki by it is said, Elia, Niki, RGB, and mechanism, Jamari, she over the ten, she's in Matavana, Kota, Mamma, Madame, said, no, that none, Chol, Mum, the Shock and charging the other same heat, no more short of ice in the same period. By your battery from Malaysia. And then you will in you.
Can I sing yourself a song to a true to The Kazan Natsunamgil Trampa Yamanishing called a Gogi or the Ini Bakyoki Kolanamgil Kokimade, Ni Drampolavna di Dodu Drapode, as in only the Sundan Namdu. That's all I think it is.
This is about you what all she or her by the same very should do what it's over. The Canis Tubu Residency Dinale, when she share, she can hold the Japate what's at Ruba.
Now coming to the conclusion of this chapter on conscientiousness, to talk just a little further about conscientiousness. So it's a particular virtuous mind that has the function of, if we divide our mind in general, between that which is on the side of virtue and that which is on the side of non-virtue. Conscientiousness is a ethical mind that keeps the mind on the side of virtue, as opposed to going to the side of non-virtue, following the afflictions. So conscientiousness we can think of as being one's ethical compass. One's ethical compass. So conscientiousness we've heard about a lot here. We don't often hear about it. Usually we hear about its companions, because it is utilized with mindfulness and vigilant introspection. So when one hears about mindfulness and vigilant introspection, one seldom then hears about conscientiousness, but it is included. These three are required together. So to talk about how the three work together and remembering or bearing in mind the function of conscientiousness is to keep the mind on the side of virtue as opposed to going to the side of the afflictions. But this is not done alone, it's done with mindfulness and vigilance. So the relationship between the three would be, for example, vigilance or introspection, or vigilant introspection, the next chapter. It serves, that is the mind that is, or the virtuous mind that is acting as a guard or a spy within our mind, So it's aware of our inner process. And vigilant introspection then serves to notice that the mind is going or potentially going towards the side of the afflictions, or is still on the side of virtue. So vigilant introspection notices this. Conscientiousness plays its role of ensuring that the mind stays on the side of virtue, that the mind stays ethical. And when the mind is going or potentially going to the side of non-virtue, introspection identifies this, conscientiousness is, this is no good, and calls the third friend that of mindfulness. Mindfulness then recalls past training. So what you've learned and what you've cultivated habituation to in meditation. So mindfulness then, having been called by conscientiousness and vigilance, serves to remind one of the faults of following the afflictions. And the reason why conscientiousness here is right and we should stay on the side of virtue. And then mindfulness will recall a relevant antidote to apply. So, for example, mindfulness, vigilance, let's repeat the process. Vigilance notices the mind is going or potentially going towards afflictions. Conscientiousness says this is not acceptable. The mind must stay on the side of virtue. Mindfulness comes up and gives many reasons why this should happen. That we have attained a precious human rebirth. If I'm following my afflictions, I'm wasting this opportunity I have achieved. I'm not fulfilling my potential. I'm not as progressing towards becoming the person I want to be. So mindfulness then serves to remind us of reasons and will call to mind an antidote. And then one's mind will return to the side of virtue. Then conscientiousness has done its job. Vigilance continues to watch the inner workings. This then is how these three virtuous minds, these three virtuous mental factors, are employed together. So next week we come to the 5th chapter, which is translated as introspection or vigilance or vigilant introspection. And it follows from conscientiousness because these three minds are a group. Bakya, bakme de nyamong re, ha? Nyamong yishunanga de bakme. You would have heard teachings often on this foundational training of ethical restraint. And ethical restraint is often likened to being the very foundation of which all good qualities can arise. Because a mind that is ethical is a mind that's restrained from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and therefore good qualities can arise. To be ethical, to have ethical restraint, you would have also often heard about mindfulness and vigilant introspection in that context. Because mindfulness and vigilance are indispensable to be ethical, but so too is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is often not explicitly stated, but is rather in the presentation incorporated into mindfulness and vigilance. But here in this context, because a whole chapter has been dedicated to it, you've heard conscientiousness discussed a lot, but it always comes with its companions, mindfulness and vigilance introspection. This is a group that works together. So if we lack conscientiousness or we are non-conscientious, then our mind will be afflicted. this will follow. So let's take and all three of these minds are required for ethical restraint. Vigilance serves the role of being aware of what is happening within our mind. So to say, as an aside, this is how the word mindfulness is often used in modern society, but it's not the actual meaning in the Dharma. It's because if vigilance is missing, then this is lacking, or you're not present. One's not aware of one's mind, and then one would say, "Oh, I wasn't mindful." That's not the meaning actually in the Dharma. So again, now back to what Ken was saying, vigilance is aware of our inner process. It's watching our mind, and it's watching: is it in the direction I want it to be or not? Then, when it notices that we may be going in the direction of the afflictions, or are in the directions of the afflictions, it calls up conscientiousness, which turns us back towards the virtue, and mindfulness then comes in support, reminding us of the faults of the afflictions and antidotes. So as an illustration, when you see someone you dislike, or you hear their voice or just their name, afflicted minds easily arise, and maybe even harmful intent, wanting to eradicate this person, push them away from one's life, not have to see or hear them again. So at this point, if one is, again to use the way that in society would say, if one is being mindful, but in the Dharma we use the word vigilance. If we are using vigilance or introspection, we will immediately be aware this is an object, this particular person, to which afflictions are likely to arise. Vigilance then is alert. I think it's also translated as alertness. It's alert to the danger that we are in. Immediately as companion conscientiousness comes about and reminds us that if we are in danger here, that's from introspection, conscientiousness says, I need to stay on the side of virtue. This is the person I want to be. Mindfulness comes about and says, this person I despise doesn't exist in the way that they appear to my mind. And here, mindfulness serves to remind us of the antidote of emptiness. So here, vigilance led to conscientiousness, and mindfulness led to wisdom. In this way, these four virtuous minds came about to protect us and keep us on the side of virtue. Then thank you very much. And we can conclude there for tonight. Thank you.